All right, I think we are on. And hello,
Awesome.
everyone. Hello, dear LinkedIn network. My name is Chengir. I'm a workforce specialist at JVS Toronto. And today we are starting our new venture, and our guest speaker is Alif Huq.
Hey,
Hi, Alif. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think we talked about this earlier, but I can't wait to go back to a barber to cut my hair. So I'm pumped for that. Other than that, I'm doing well. Life is good.
Awesome. All right, so maybe you could tell a little bit about yourself. And we are going to interview talent acquisition specialists, HR people, so kind of give job seekers an insight into the mind of HR person.
hmm
And I know that you have a lot of experience in recruiting.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. Even, before recruiting, I used to work at one of the best business schools in Ontario, the Schulich School of Business, and essentially I worked alongside a lot of career coaches at these top business schools, learning job hunt strategies and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And once that role ended, I essentially applied all the strategies they showed me and was eventually able to land a role in the recruiting space in just about a month using these tactics they taught me. But basically, while I was working in the recruitment space, you can imagine I've done thousands and thousands of telephone interviews, screened through thousands of resumes. Like literally, I can differentiate between what makes a good candidate through an interview and what makes like a bad candidate. What's good resume, what's bad, how the ATS system works. Essentially, I just understood the behind the scenes of the hiring process that recruiters sort of go through. And beyond that, at one point I decided to leave HR and the recruiting space and pursue a career in digital marketing. And leveraging a number of unconventional job hunt strategies, I was able to break into the digital marketing space without necessarily having any formal marketing experience, knowing anyone, or even studying marketing in school, using unconventional job hunt strategies, whatnot, that I've learned both, again, from personal experience from my recruiting time and also alongside working alongside career coaches at the business school I mentioned. But in a bucket, that's kind of what I'm all about.
Awesome, awesome. That's great stuff. So maybe you could share a little bit about like your personal story. So how does a new grad like yourself back in the days, how do they land a job? And yeah, like maybe from the perspective of recruiters, well, how did you get this job as a recruiter?
Yeah, so that goes back like a year or so, but basically, when I was working alongside the career coaches, I was in school, like I was a student, and my part-time job was working at the business school with the career coaches. And oftentimes, I would always go up to these career coaches after work, and I would ask them, "Hey, like I would love some tips right now on how to get a job, and I know you know a lot. Can you mentor me through the process?" And what would happen is after work, they would like, for 30 minutes or so, they would teach me fundamental skills. For example, one of the strategies they taught us was how to reach out to influential people on LinkedIn using a very specific script.
Mhm.
And basically, when it came time for me to graduate and they asked me, "Hey, do you still want to work here?" I sort of said, "You know what? No, I want to get out of the university life and I want to get a real life job," right? And
Yeah.
I basically applied their scripts and techniques nonstop. So, reaching out to recruiters on LinkedIn, trying to like, go to events and job fairs and networking events and trying to meet people and all this great stuff. But essentially, the way I got that recruiting role was basically I reached out to a recruiter on a LinkedIn, asked him a bunch of questions. We got into a lot of great conversation, and from there
Mhm.
he's like, "Hey, forward me your resume," and I gave him my resume. He forwarded to HR, and eventually I got hired. And what's interesting was that I asked him for feedback, like, "Yo, like way back in time when you hired me, what are your thoughts on me?" And he said, "You have great interpersonal skills, and you're really good at relationship building." And essentially, that is the reason why I referred you into the role. So again, people skills and relationship building seems to be a common denominator that generally keeps coming up. Even today to this day when I get new jobs, right?
Yeah, well, you obviously strike me, and probably like everyone is a very extroverted person, but like some people, they're like too shy, too timid.
Mm.
What would be your take? How do you develop these kind of skills?
Honestly, if I tell you a personal story, way back in high school, I was awkward, shy, and I didn't like talking to people, and I was just awkward kid. And it came to a point where I realized I absolutely like hate myself because I can't talk to people. So eventually, it bottled up to a point where I forced myself to talk to people when I didn't want to, and it resulted in a number of awkward conversations, awkward silences. Literally, you can imagine we're walking home for lunch and the whole walk is just me and this other guy, and it was just awkward and silent. And like, what I'm trying to say is that there is no hack when it comes to social skills and building interpersonal skills. It's
Yeah.
more of that you literally have to practice it. You have to go through the grind. And, doing stuff like this, talking to people, whatnot, right? So, getting out of the comfort zone is the biggest thing I can definitely say. Because I can get it. I get it. Like reaching out to a recruiter on LinkedIn, a stranger, maybe even like a manager at like a TD Bank or something on LinkedIn, that
Yeah.
can be intimidating, right? But again, it is through practice and developing that skill set where you build the confidence and eventually, going for call is no problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely can relate to that. Confidence is like kind of understanding that there are certain
Yeah.
things that you simply can do, and you to be is to do, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
something you get through experience. And
Exactly.
I think this hashtag circulating in LinkedIn, do it through fear, right? Do
Ah,
it through fear, and you will get to the confidence.
nice. I
Like,
haven't seen that hashtag yet, but I'll
right.
definitely check it out. Okay,
Yeah.
I like that. I like that though.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Okay. So what's the recent development? So you've been working as a digital marketer, doing video content and stuff. What happened there? So I
Yeah, for
think
sure.
like our listeners need to know this part of the
My
story
story.
to
Yeah,
relate. Yeah.
exactly. You know what? Like, no matter how successful I was with the job hunting stuff, I'm still not perfect. So in this case, unfortunately, my role did have to let me go because COVID situation happened, and companies are kind of cutting down on certain things. So I was just one of the people that were unfortunately let go. Uh, you know, um, it's a bittersweet type of thing. I realized one thing. It's that the especially nowadays, like the best thing you can do is make yourself the most valuable person in the company for them to want to keep you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's the biggest thing I realized after this let go situation.
hmm
Yeah.
Okay. So what would be your take? Like, I know that you're very positive and mentally resilient, but like, how do you approach this, like mentally, this situation? And like, so
Yeah.
your CEO is calling you, oh, something is coming, and then this initial process of kind of getting through it.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll walk you through exactly how that happened. And again, this
Yeah,
isn't to say my company was bad or anything of that nature. I still
yeah,
like them, still enjoy them. It's just an unfortunate situation. But basically, you can imagine working. All of a sudden, a message comes on from my manager, and they were like, "Hey, can you jump on a Zoom call with me?" Out of nowhere, and I was like, "Oh no, I think I know where this is going." I hop in the Zoom call, and you can see like a preview of who's in the chat or whatever, who's in the Zoom
yeah,
call. I saw the CEO and the manager, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh, okay, here it goes. And they didn't say hi, they didn't say how are you or whatever it is. It's just right away. Hey, we're letting you go effective immediately due to COVID-19. And I'll be honest with you, I have been laid off in the past as well, and this is like something I'm unfortunately familiar with. But basically, the way I kind of approached it was more like, in the past when I would let go, it would be personal in the sense that, wow, you'd let go of me, why? And I would just be resentful of these people, and I'd be stuck on that even after I left the job and everything.
yeah,
But in this one, I realized, hey, you know what? Like, the worst thing I can do is hold it against them. So I decided to take it very professionally, like, hey, you know what? I understand the situation. Unfortunately, COVID happened, but you know what? Can you give me feedback in terms of my performance? What could I have done better? And moving forward in my next company, what do you think I should do so that, like, this doesn't happen? And they gave me some really good feedback and whatnot. And yeah, like getting fired or let go, like I can imagine it's hard, and I think the biggest thing we can do as job hunters or like even just people in general is not to take things personally. You know
All
what I mean?
right, awesome. Like, okay, so maybe a couple of insights into the mental process, like after it happens, how did you kind of approach this?
Yeah, for sure. So again, first step is not to take personal. So it is what it is type of situation. I can't lie. There were a number of times where I just was like, oh my God, like I'm not good enough. All this dialogue that sort of comes to your head. But I think the important thing is to just like experience, like feel that for a bit, but then you gotta move on and shift, right? Like unfortunately, the world is made in a way where no one cares about you. You know what I mean? Like you always almost have to like take care of yourself. So, in a weird way, and this is just me and how I go about it, but I develop like a wolf mentality whenever I go through crappy things. So I think to myself like, oh no, like no, I'm not gonna let this happen to me. I'm gonna work on myself. I'm gonna develop my skill set so I'm the most valuable person in the next company I go to. They're not gonna want to fire me at all, right? And again, it's like that hunger, like that driven mentality I just like kind of soak into my head and sort of drowns out that sadness in a way, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's a really good way to go approach it long term because you can lead to burnout and everything, but that's generally my go-to. But yeah, I think at the end, just gratitude always wins, though. Grateful that I even have a job in the first place. Grateful that I
Yeah,
even
yeah.
have that experience. Grateful that I can still live without that job, right?
Absolutely. So, like, definitely, and this is what I normally say to my clients, right? It's
Yeah.
like half of the success is an ability to flip this game inside your head, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the amount of energy you will spend on kind of feeling devastated or into feeling like, hey, I can do something about it and focus on being productive, right? Uh,
Exactly.
but it's all
Exactly.
about channeling this energy.
Exactly. And job hunting is not even the most fun thing to do ever. You know what I mean? Like, there's no thing telling you you will get a job by this date, so just hang on tight, right? It's just ambiguous and whatnot, right? So, yeah, mentality is everything, especially when in job hunt, right?
All right, awesome. So going back a little bit more about like kind of a technical tips about yeah, back to your experience as a recruiter. How does a recruiter think? Like when it comes to resumes, you have all the bunch of resumes, you have to process them. What's the
Yeah,
thought process there?
for sure. First thing is, there's a difference between in-house recruiting and agency recruiting. So in-house is more like a recruiter works for a company in a company, and their job is to fill the positions. An agency generally has multiple positions to fill for different companies. So they're balancing a bunch of different roles that they need to fill. But in terms of the mentality, to give you some context, it works sort of like this. The recruiter will speak to the hiring manager and have an understanding of what sort of skills and qualifications and type of person that the hiring manager is looking to hire. And what the recruiter would do is basically really try to understand that and then go out there and using various tools, whether it's LinkedIn Recruiter, Boolean Strings, or Indeed, whatever it is, they will try to find that right persona. And the struggle with recruiting is that, the hiring manager has certain expectations, and hence the recruiter is looking for someone who meets those expectations. You know what I mean? So the recruiter can't necessarily give everyone jobs. They're looking for a very specific type of people and personality that fill in the criteria the hiring manager is sort of looking for. One of the struggles I've noticed with like a lot of recruiting and whatnot was that recruiters would submit candidates to the hiring managers in the form of an interview, and then the hiring manager would give feedback to the recruiter, be like, hey, this person was really far off, they're not that good, and I don't know why you're not doing a good job, right? Like it's stressful for the recruiter, because if the hiring manager thinks the person that recruiter is submitting is bad, it will also look bad on the recruiter. So you can imagine the recruiter is sort of going through a lot of pressure. And given like what we're going through right now with the COVID, there's probably a lot of people job hunting, speaking to recruiters, right? But unfortunately, recruiters only have to pick certain few people, right? Their job is basically filter out, find the gold, and send the gold.
Awesome. All right. And so the question is for me, like, many people who will be watching this are newcomers. Many of my
Mm-hmm.
clients are newcomers. They come to the country and they hear this first thing. What is the Canadian standard for the resume? What's your take on do's and don'ts on the resume?
Yeah, for sure. Couple of things that kind of come to mind. So avoid graphics and designs and colors, because what we've noticed is that, and there's a lot of research out there in the internet, but basically when you have a graphically beautiful resume, it doesn't get picked. The resume keywords doesn't get picked up in the applicant tracking system. Let me take a second to explain that. So an applicant tracking system is basically where once you hit submit on Indeed or whatever it is, your resume gets uploaded to a machine, and the machine scans through your resume looking for certain keywords. And if your resume has those certain keywords that the machine is scanning for, then your resume would be on quote unquote top of the pile. And hence the recruiter will see it, oh, cool, you're qualified. Then they're more likely to reach out to you. In terms of finding the keywords, it's pretty simple. Generally, they're very technical, industry focused keywords. Just open up a bunch of job descriptions, scan through the job descriptions, look for common technical key terms that keep appearing in the multiple job descriptions, and make sure to include that in your resume. So that is first thing, ATS system, always optimizing your resume for ATS system. Second, I don't think a lot of people focus their resume on value. They focus it more on, hey, here's all the jobs that I've worked on, blah, 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 right? Ideally, your resume should be tailored for the role that you're trying to apply for, and showcase to basically it's a marketing document that says, hey, I have all the skills and qualifications for this role, hence you need to hire me. And that's how you want to approach your resume. You don't want to just write down your entire work history on one document and have the recruiter try to make sense of it, right? Another thing I do want to keep in mind is, I've done a lot of resume skimming and scanning. Just keep in mind when a recruiter goes to a resume, they look at it for maybe max 6 seconds. And the way I approach it is this: the recruiter has a caveman brain. They literally don't want to take the time to read a resume. They will literally do a quick skim and leave the resume. So if you have blocky text and chunkiness in your resume in small fonts, it's playing against your favors of potentially getting an interview, right? And of course, last thing is create accomplishment statements. That is a simple Google search. If you search accomplishment statements and how to create one, you will find a bunch of resources. Trust me, that is so important. So do that. Okay. Those are just a couple tips. There's so many, but I hope that it helps people at least.
Awesome. That definitely, like, I'm sitting here and I'm learning a lot because, like, I used to say, like, these HR people, they have about 30 seconds to scan your resume, but you're saying like no person are different.
Oh, 30 is way too long.
Yeah, and
When
I like.
yeah.
And I like the way you put it when actually I like the formulation itself because I haven't heard people approaching it that resume is a marketing tool and you're basically marketing yourself. That's
Exactly.
as a marketologist, I guess yourself. That's a great approach.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So you've been spending a lot of time with people on the telephone, interviewing them, having all different bunch of conversations, and definitely after some time, like you can just feel it, right? This is a good interview. This person's gonna go far. This or something is off. Like, or what are do's and don'ts on the telephone interview, and how do you feel like this person? Oh yeah, something clicks.
Yeah, for sure. I want to try to give advice here in this video that you won't find on YouTube, and generic career coaches won't tell you this. But let me take you the deep psychology of like an interviewer. A couple things. First, and this is very common. Like, do not overspeak. Trust me, like work with my colleagues and we always complain. Oh my God, this guy spoke so much. I had to cut him off. Oh my gosh, blah blah blah. Right. So number one, just be concise and straight to the point. Second, don't talk in hypotheticals, talk in tangibles. And what I mean by this is when I was recruiting and I had to interview people for a customer service role, and one of the questions I often had to ask was, tell me about a time you had to deal with an irate customer. And their general response would be, if I had to deal with an irate customer, I would do X, Y, Z, right? But that's not what I'm trying to look for. I'm literally looking for a tangible example of a time you dealt with an irate customer. Because for me as a recruiter, this tells me your mindset. The whole point of like an interview is understanding your mindset. So if you tell me if I had to talk to a irate customer, I would do this. It doesn't tell me about you. But if you say, during my time at Tim Hortons, there was a customer that approached me and they were not very happy with their coffee. Hence, blah, 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 right? Like actually talking about an actual example. So, literally before you have an interview coming up, literally just Google the hardest interview questions you'll ever be asked and take a whole day to write down tangible answers to those interview questions and go in it with that, right? So again, don't talk about hypotheticals, talk about tangibles. Another quick tip that you won't find anywhere else is a big key selling factor to selling yourself in an interview is showcasing your thought process. So let me tell you again, that a way to sell yourself, besides your accomplishments, besides your previous work experience, is walking someone through your thinking process. For example, if I always had to ask, like, tell me about a time you overcame an obstacle, and they would say, well, my coworker was mad at me. I talked to him. He was happy. The end. Whatever. That is not good enough. I need to understand what your thinking process was like when you were approaching a coworker who you had conflict with. So if you said something like, while I was working on this project, we got handed a huge piece of deliverable that me and my teammate need to deliver, but I noticed that he was a little frustrated because he had a lot to do. So instead of taking the approach of me versus him, I decided to work collaboratively together. So I approached him in the form of an empathetic situation, like, hey John, I noticed you have a lot going on and I want to work with you to understand how we can work out through this together. Are you okay if I book a 30-minute meeting so we can talk through this? Notice what I did there. I'm walking someone through a thinking process, and it sounds so much better than like, oh, we worked together, we solved it, right? So yeah, generally, there's a lot of tips out there, but I don't think there's enough about these three things that I've kind of mentioned to you right there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. And like, I also kind of a big advocate of writing, and I tell they give this generic advice to everyone to go to interview. Like, hey, be spontaneous, be natural. But I think the only way to be spontaneous or natural is actually to know your stuff. So like
Exactly.
I definitely say like put it in writing. Like writing is thinking on the paper, right? And once you have it consolidated there, once you have it in a kind of a physical way, right? You can
Yeah,
start to elaborate on it and to kind of
I
juggle
totally
your
agree.
ideas.
You
Yeah.
would know,
That,
right? You wrote a book.
yeah. Yeah, thanks. And then you go to the interview and then you go like, hey, like that's a good question. Let me think, but you're not thinking because you know your stuff.
Exactly. I almost see it like I like interviews because like again I know what I'm talking about, so it's more like me talking about myself. I remember I had this interview for the digital marketing agency, my first agency I ever worked at, digital marketing wise, and I was like, they put me into an interview, and I was like, come on, like tackle me, like come with the worst right now. And I remember like staring at the recruiter with this nice smile, and she actually looked nervous because she was like, okay, but you know, I'm not trying to boost myself. I'm trying to say your mindset and mentality and knowing yourself, like you said, and confidence about that will show to the recruiter and it'll affect your performance. So I just want to build on that.
Definitely, yes. In psychology, I think they call it a meta message. When you see a guy and he
Mm,
wants to fight you, you know he wants to fight you without saying anything, right? So it's the same thing.
mm,
What kind of confidence do you project? It shouldn't be like
exactly.
overconfidence, right? But still, it
Exactly.
should be calm, organized in your core, right?
She knew I was trying to fight her. That's why in the interview. No, I was joking.
Yeah, and then I have another question for you. Like,
Yeah.
what's your take on informational interviews? Like, let's say, from the position probably already of a marketologist, right? Someone wants to be in your company and work in your role. They
Yes.
would approach you. How would you like to be approached? And what do you think? How responsive you are to this kind of knocking the doors?
100%. This is an awesome question. So here's the thing. Informational interviews are the golden keys that you have to use in a job hunt if you want to get a job. Like it is the number one thing you need to do. And if you don't know what an informational interview is, like quick Google search that will explain it. But basically how would you approach someone for an informational interview? And how do you essentially reach out to them and be like, hey, I want a job. Can you talk to me so it feels like I'm building a relationship, but really I'm using you for a job? Like how do you say that in a way that's like not sleazy, right? That's the challenge I've noticed a lot, especially with the students who I coach. But essentially, the way you'd want to reach out to them is this: if you don't know anyone, and let's say you found someone on LinkedIn, how do you get a phone call with them or you can meet coffee? It's very
Yeah.
simple. All you do is say, "Hey, John, I noticed you work at." As a senior manager in Deloitte, I'm looking to get myself into that sort of career. Can I ask you for a brief 15-minute phone conversation for some career advice? That is it. We're not asking for a job. We're not giving them a resume or anything of that nature. We're simply asking for a small, easy, anyone can do 15-minute phone call for career advice. And if you ever had like a moment where someone was asking you for advice, you probably felt like honored. You probably felt good, and especially if the other person was taking notes and was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. You probably felt really good. And again, that's the way you want to kind of approach these informational interviews. Again, don't ask for a job. Don't ask them to look at your resume. Don't even mention a resume. But instead, go with the approach of you are freaking awesome. You know a lot. I can learn a lot from you. Sensei, can you teach me? But that's kind of the mindset I coach people through all the time. And of course, there's a lot of follow up stuff and all that good stuff. But in terms of approaching, I do recommend that way.
Maybe kind of if you could share their insights into like what is the thought process behind it? Because I know some people they're struggling with this. They're like, oh, how can I just go and knock people's doors, right? And maybe they're not going to respond. Maybe I don't know how to
Yeah.
approach this. Like again, as I said, maybe too timid, too
No,
shy.
100%. That's a really good question. So let me walk you through how I do this. And this is stuff I coach people through. Basically, make a list of 5 companies you want to work for. Okay, and go on company's page on LinkedIn. Then you want to click on the right side, see all 10,000 employees or whatever. Click that. You will see a list of all the people who work in that company. And what you want to do is go through that list and filter through people and find senior managers, supervisors, team leads, generally influential people who would be hypothetically managing you if you were to get a job in that company, right? So if you're trying to get into HR, you would look for HR managers, HR leaders, HR supervisors, whatever it is, right? And once you filter all that out, you should ideally keep a tracker and fill out about 50 of them, like 50 people, okay? And so 10 for each of the 5 companies you want to work for. And the way you want to approach them is this: you want to send a connection request, but not just a connection request. You want to send a sorry, connection request with a note. And in the note, keep in mind there's character limits, but you want to say, hey, John, I noticed you're a senior HR manager at Microsoft. I myself am looking to get into that sort of career. Can I ask you for a brief phone call over a 15-minute? Can I ask you for some career advice over a brief 15-minute phone call? Would really appreciate hearing your insights. And ideally, you want to send this message, connection request with a note, to all 50 people. And I've done this so many times. The success rate you will get approximately is about 1 in 3. If you're in a 1 in 3 ratio right now, then you are on a good path, right? And then from there, you schedule a phone call, ask them for advice, and start building a relationship. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all great tips. I think definitely by just going to company's profile and going through this, even like checking the people's profile, you can understand a lot about the
Mm-hmm.
culture of the company, what kind of people are getting hired there, or what kind of
Mm-hmm.
people are working there.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of companies, especially progressive ones, startup kind of wide, they also have YouTube channels where you can
Mm-hmm.
learn lots of stuff there about the culture. And
Exactly.
knowing culture is very important, especially yeah, if we think about even like the thought of overqualification, this kind of issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you go like with the full suits and it's absolutely casual, right?
Yeah. It's
Um,
interesting when you speak about that because when we're doing a lot of hiring in my agency, I was kind of talking to my coworkers who were doing the interviews, and they're like, "Hey, would you?" I asked them, "Would you prefer them to walk in suits?" And we're a very casual environment, and my friend said, like, "No, I wouldn't want them to walk in a suit because that showcases that they don't know the culture here. If they just maybe wore a button-up shirt with like a nice like blazer, that's it. But a full-on suit would be a little too much. So that's an interesting point in itself.
Absolutely. So definitely like a guideline would be research the culture, and then yeah, well, like our rule of thumb is just go one step further than the dress code, right? If it goes business
Oh
casual,
yeah,
go full business. If
yeah,
it's
one
if
step
it's
up.
yeah, if it's casual, like t-shirt and the blazer would work probably.
Exactly. You already know, man. You already know.
All right, awesome. And yeah, I know that you're yourself, you're a lot into content creation. Do you think that this it would be your general recommendation to create content to all job seekers out there, or those are just like for someone? Not it's not gonna work for everyone.
So here's the thing, whether you're a job seeker or not, if you just want to develop personally, you have to put out content. It is the standard in 2020 that you need to put out content. Let's dig into this a little bit more. Speaking literally from my personal experience, I've literally had job offers because I put out content, because I delivered workshops, because I do webinars and stuff like that, and write LinkedIn articles. People reach out to me. The philosophy is when you put out good stuff out there, people will see your expert status, they will see you're a professional, they'll see your stuff, and then from there, they're more likely to reach out, right? But when it comes to content, that is probably absolutely key when it comes to job hunting. Now, you might be asking yourself, what kind of content, how do I do it, what if I'm not in fun, right? But it's very simple. You don't need to that like you can imagine if I'm trying to get into a marketing position, right? As an SEO expert, whatever, and
Yeah.
I write a thorough article on LinkedIn, like about the 5 tips for an SEO optimized blog, and I put a lot of hashtags on that, and it kind of picks up traffic on LinkedIn. Can you imagine the type of people that would see? And you can imagine, the type of people who would like that sort of post, and imagine reaching out to those people who like the post and be like, hey, cool, I noticed you liked my article. Would you like to talk further? And from there, you find out they're a manager, and then they're hiring, and then oh my gosh, they already know you're really good and smart at this, right? Again, it's just so many. I remember I was doing a workshop at York University about resume writing, whatnot, right? And then the professor came up to me and she's like, hey, would you like a teaching assistant opportunity, because I can see you're really good at what you do. Again, it's because I put myself out there and gave value and content. It's why those opportunities sort of came to me. But in terms of creating it, you don't have to always make it about like stuff you're smart at. If you literally, I have a friend who did something really cool. He documented his job hunting process, and he made videos, self-care videos about his job hunting process. Like he would make videos about like, hey, make sure you take a walk every day. This is what I'm doing right now, and these are the courses I'm taking to learn more for my next future role. And it was crazy. In his presentation, he literally showed screenshots of like tens of job opportunities coming his way because people knew about him. People were referring him to jobs. People were impressed by his video marketing skills, whatever it is, right? If you're struggling to make content, all you need to do is think about like, if you watched a cool video on YouTube and you learned a lot, you might even want to like write a LinkedIn article about that, right? If you always want to start a podcast and you had a great conversation with your friend and learned some really cool industry insights, you might want to just like record yourself like talking about things and post it on LinkedIn. Again, the idea is to not overthink it and just be authentic you and almost like document your journey. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it resonates a lot. It's like there are probably four types of content that you need to post if you can, right? Make sure, first of all, that it's a quality content, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't need to always talk business, you can entertain, you can educate, and you can inspire people. And I think
Mm.
especially during these times, you need more of the content where you can see that the person acts not from fear, more of kindness, more of compassion, and less negativity about all the virus stuff. Yeah, if
Yeah,
it
that's a
makes
good
sense.
point. That's a
Yeah.
really good point. I like how you said that inspire, educate, and what was the last one?
Entertain,
Entertain.
and
That is
of
huge.
course
Yeah.
business. Yeah. And yeah, probably we're not gonna stretch it out too much. The last question would be, with all things that happen, what would be your strategy for the next couple months? How you're gonna address this situation that's happening outside, and how you're gonna address the job search,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
maybe kind of your also, let's
Yeah.
say, message, right, to the world.
For sure. Right now, especially since like again I have no job, the first thing I'm doing right now is developing myself and working in the digital marketing agency. I realize there's so much I don't know, and this is the perfect time now that I have time. Now that people don't go outside, I don't have to commute anywhere or anything. I have so much time in my hands. This is perfect time to take a course, take a boot camp, whatever it is, develop myself, right? Because again, we have that time. So number one, developing myself. Second is basically the method I kind of showed you find
Yeah.
making a list of people who work at cool places, reaching out to them, building connections, and probably like treat this whole process like a job itself. Literally 5 hours a day, go on my laptop, just prospect potential employers or whatever it is, try to build relationships and get on phone calls. And I'll probably do that like 5 hours a day in chunks. Again, sometimes job hunting is harder than the job itself, and you got to treat job hunting like a job, right?
Yeah.
So those two things, again, prospecting from future employers and developing yourself are the most important things that I'm looking forward to do, and I recommend anyone who may have lost a job or is job hunting right now during COVID to do.
Definitely, yes. So you summarized it perfectly. Upscaling yourself, networking,
Exactly.
and working on whatever you can work with, like to make this money coming in, right? Keep job
Mm-hmm.
searching. There are companies that are slowly unfreezing in their hiring process,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's going to be a side hustle. Maybe you would like to take a look into revisit the gig economy, take a look at freelance again. Um,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
all right, I think it was a gold mine of value, and we're gonna be seeing Alif more and more, I hope, for new
Awesome.
kind of talks, new nice talks. But I know that Alif, you're running a business, so probably a couple words for all people out there
Yeah,
who would
for
like to learn
sure.
more.
Yeah, so I do a lot of like personal coaching when it comes to job hunting, whatnot. Ran like virtual boot camps, and in the past I've done like resume writing services. The takeaway is that if you need help with your job hunt, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll try to provide you the best resources that help whatever you may need in order to help you get a job fast. So again, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Alif Huq, ALIF space HUQ.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. It was great having you here. I hope everyone out there who's watching this refuse to act from fear. Spread
Yeah,
love. Stay positive. We're all gonna get through this together, and we'll coming back with more good stuff for you.
awesome. Take care, man.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
You too. See you.